I can't even buy a chair. Thomas, your mom froze the card. Diana's voice blasted from his speakerphone like a siren meant to summon war. I was stirring cream into my coffee when the front door slammed open. Thomas, my only son, stood in the doorway, his chest heaving. "Give me the password," he barked. Before I could say a word, his hand rose. I saw it before I felt anything. The tension in his shoulders, the twitch in his fingers. I stared at him. Not the man in front of me, but the boy I once taught to thread a needle. The boy who used to leave crayon drawings at my sewing machine. That boy was gone. "You froze her card," he demanded again. "She's been spending $12,000 a month," I said quietly. His mouth twisted. "She said it was for the house, for the baby we're going to have someday. You knew we were building a future." I set my cup down. "No, she's building an inventory." His eyes narrowed. "Don't do this, Mom." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him to believe me. I just stepped aside, letting him pace. He didn't notice the envelope on the counter. Bank statements, furniture invoices, sales receipts. Let him scream. Let him slam doors. He thought he was fighting for a future. He didn't realize she'd already sold most of it out from under him. When he left, the room echoed with silence, broken only by the soft drip of coffee down the side of my mug. I picked up the envelope, slid it into the drawer, and locked it. That's when I reached for my seam scissors, not to cut fabric, but to slice the last thread tying me to denial. My sewing room was once the most joyful corner of the house. Light pulled through the window just right, hitting bolts of satin and lace. The room smelled of starch and thread and sometimes talcum powder. Over the years, I stitched wedding gowns that made mothers cry, and veils so delicate they seemed to float. Thomas used to sit cross-legged in the corner, scribbling castles and capes in his coloring books while I pinned hems. He'd hum nonsense tunes, hand me spools, and call every ruffle a storm cloud. But the day Diana stepped into that room, the air changed. She touched my fabrics like they were napkins. "Sweet mama," she'd say, all breath and warmth, "we're going to take care of you real soon." She said it like a promise. It felt like a performance. After Robert passed, the house fell quiet. Too quiet. That's when Diana's requests began. Small things at first. "The toaster broke, Mama. We're getting a rug, but Thomas's check didn't clear." Always followed by that honeyed tone. I gave her my card, thinking I was helping, just for now, just until they caught up. Then came the surprises. A curved velvet couch I'd never seen. A marble-top kitchen island that wouldn't fit in their galley kitchen. When I checked the bank statement and saw $9,400 gone in 1 month, I nearly dropped the kettle. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I convinced myself it would pass, that they were just nesting, that grief had scrambled my boundaries. I'd buried my husband. I didn't want to bury my peace, too. But then I saw Diana's new handbag, gold clasps, designer label, the price of 3 wedding gowns. "Gift from a client," she chirped when I asked. I nodded, lips pressed tight. She didn't know I'd seen the charge. That night, I sewed long after midnight just to remember what real work looked like. The scissors in my hand felt heavier than usual. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I hadn't made things clear. Maybe I'd been too soft, too trusting. I told myself Thomas and Diana were just starting out, that young couples made mistakes. I thought if Robert were still here, he'd know how to put his foot down. But I didn't have his voice, only my silence. I brought it up one evening, hoping for understanding. Thomas was fixing himself a plate of leftovers. "Son," I said gently, "do you know how much Diana spent last month on the joint account?" I didn't accuse, I just asked. He didn't even look at me. "Diana just wants the house to look nice," he muttered, scraping food onto his plate. "You still have money, right?" That sentence held more betrayal than any theft. "You still have money." As if that made it fine. As if I were a vault instead of a mother. That night, I opened every bank statement I had, spread them across the dining table, line after line of charges, designer stores, boutique furniture shops, online orders with absurd totals, 2 dining sets, 2 identical velvet sofas, matching armchairs, delivery fees, no returns. It didn't add up, literally. Where was all of it? Their house wasn't that big, and I'd never seen half these things. Then I remembered Angela, my neighbor. She worked 3 blocks from the weekend market. The next morning, I brought over a tin of cookies and asked casually if she ever went by the outdoor stalls. She leaned in. "I've seen your daughter-in-law there," she said quietly. "She sells brand new furniture out of the back of her SUV. Told the vendor next to me she gets it wholesale." I smiled politely and nodded like I didn't feel the world tilting under me. That night, I looked around my house. the threadbare curtains, the coffee table with one leg shorter than the rest, and felt the lie closing in. Diana hadn't just taken my money, she'd turned me into the supplier of her side business, and she didn't even leave me a receipt. Diana came for lunch that Friday, wearing a silk blouse I'd never seen and perfume thick enough to stay in the hallway long after she passed. She kissed my cheek and set her purse on the entry bench like always. I stirred the soup slowly, watching her through the reflection in the microwave door. "Sweet mama," she said, digging into the bread basket, "you always make things feel like home." After lunch, she went to check something on her phone in the backyard. I took the chance. Her purse was right where she left it, unzipped. Inside, I found a folded receipt, $400 for a facial at a spa downtown. I stared at the number, stunned. I charged $300 for an entire wedding dress, and she spent more than that on a single hour of pampering. I placed everything back just as I'd found it and went upstairs. The drawer in the guest room, where they stayed when they needed space, had always annoyed me. She used it like it was hers. That afternoon, I opened it with fresh eyes. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on the bed surrounded by evidence, catalogs from boutique furniture houses, wholesale sample swatches, order forms with my name and card number scrawled across the top, a sticky note with resale prices and client initials. She wasn't decorating, she was running a resale business. And I was the bank. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there listening to the hum of the fridge and the creak of the wind against the siding. In the morning, I got dressed like it was any other Saturday and walked to the bank. The manager, Edgar, was a soft-spoken man with gray hair and kind eyes. He listened to everything. When I showed him the receipts, he didn't even blink. "You're not the first," he said, "but you're one of the smartest to catch it in time." I canceled the card, changed the passwords, opened a new account under my maiden name. And when Diana called later that afternoon, sweet as syrup, asking if I'd seen a charge not go through, I smiled into the phone and said, "No idea." Diana's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "I can't even buy a chair. Thomas, your mother froze the card." I stood at the sink, rinsing dishes in silence, hands shaking only slightly. I knew what was coming. 10 minutes later, the front door slammed open. Thomas didn't knock. He didn't call out. He marched straight into the kitchen like a stranger with a badge. "You froze the card." His voice was sharp, clipped. "I did," I said calmly. "It's my account, my name." He stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. "You can't just cut us off. Diana needs things for the house. You know we're trying to start a family." "You've spent over $25,000 in 3 months," I said. "I didn't cut you off. I woke up." His jaw clenched. He stepped closer. "Just give me the password." "No." The word didn't need force, but it ignited something in him. Thomas's hand came fast, the back of it, catching my cheek with a sharp snap. I didn't fall, but the sting rushed through my skull like heat. He stared at me, his mother, as if unsure who he'd hit. He didn't apologize. He didn't cry. He didn't even lower his voice. "You just don't want us to live well," he said flatly. "Dad would have wanted us to have a good life." Then he left, not a glance back. The door closed like punctuation on a sentence I never wanted to read. I stood still, the dish towel in my hand now soaked and dripping. Later that evening, when the house had gone quiet and the bruise on my face had started to bloom, I opened the drawer in Robert's desk. I hadn't touched it since he passed. Inside were tax returns, life insurance letters, and the name of the lawyer he trusted most. I took out the folder, ran my fingers across the edge, and knew what I had to do next. They'd taken enough, but they hadn't taken everything, not yet. The receipts led me there. Diana had used her real name for the lease. Sloppy, or maybe just arrogant. Either way, the storage unit was real and not far. Angela's niece, Clara, worked weekends at the same facility. She helped me quietly rent the unit next door. We waited until Diana left one afternoon, her SUV packed light. Clara opened the narrow side panel between the walls, just wide enough to peer through. What I saw nearly dropped me to my knees. Sofas still in plastic, dining sets boxed and labeled, brand-name appliances stacked like showroom stock. Paintings leaned against the wall. Expensive ones I'd seen in catalogs Diana had left at my house. This wasn't decorating, this was inventory. She hadn't been furnishing a home. She'd been running a resale operation using my account as her business line. Nothing was returned, nothing was gifted. It was all sitting there waiting to be flipped. I took photos of every item, every label, every invoice still taped to the side of a package. Clara showed me how to enable date and timestamps. Then we left as quietly as we came. Back home, I opened the old digital recorder I used for pattern notes and started a new file. That night, Diana called. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she sighed. "Just give me the card back. We can all be happy again." I didn't respond. I just let her talk. She rambled about how Thomas was stressed, how I was hurting the family, how I didn't want to die alone. "You love us, don't you?" she said, sweet as syrup. "Then trust us. We'll take care of everything." I ended the call, saved the file, and backed it up to a thumb drive. It was time to stop being a witness to my own undoing. The next morning, I drove to Edgar's bank again, this time with proof in my purse. She rang the bell like it was still her home. A silk blouse tucked into high-waisted pants. That crocodile purse she once claimed was a knockoff, though I knew better. She walked in without waiting for an invitation and sat on my sofa like it belonged to her. "We can end this now," she said, crossing her legs slowly. "No one has to get hurt. Give me back access, and I won't tell Thomas what you've done." I stood still. "What I've done?" Her smile thinned. "He'll believe me. He always has." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "You've been acting erratic. That slap, you provoked him. The accusations, paranoia. You know, it wouldn't be hard to make someone question your mental state at your age." She thought she had me cornered, but I reached behind me for the manila folder. I opened it slowly, then laid each piece out on the coffee table. A photo of the red leather sofa still wrapped in her storage unit. A receipt from the spa clipped next to a resale listing for new Italian table, must sell fast. The printout of her voice from the recorder, "We'll take care of everything." She didn't flinch. Her face didn't collapse the way I'd expected. It hardened. "You'll regret this," she said. "I already have," I replied, folding the folder shut again. She stood, adjusted her blouse, and took one last look at me. "You've made this much harder than it had to be, Belinda." She let herself out. I waited until the door clicked shut, then picked up the folder again. The last page hadn't been shown yet. I kept it back for a reason. It held something more dangerous than photos. It held her handwriting. I walked into the precinct with the folder pressed to my chest like a shield. The officer at the desk directed me to Detective Ramona Tate, a woman with kind eyes and a voice that didn't rush. I sat across from her and told the whole story, every receipt, every item sold, every lie. She didn't interrupt once. When I was done, she leaned back and folded her arms. "She's done this before. Out of state, different names. You're just the first to stand up." I nodded. "Then let's be the last." The paperwork took hours. I signed affidavit after affidavit. Bank fraud, wire fraud, theft by deception. I filed copies of everything I documented down to the time-stamped photos. 4 days later, they arrested her mid-sale at her weekend stall. The love seat she was selling still had my name on the invoice. I was drinking tea at the kitchen table when Thomas stormed through the door. No knock, just fury. "What did you do?" he demanded. "She said you're framing her. She said you've been losing your grip for months." I said nothing, just slid the folder across the table. He opened it slowly. His eyes moved from page to page. Furniture tags, photos, resale listings, the note with my name scrawled beside dollar amounts and the word vulnerable. He didn't speak for 45 minutes. Then finally he said, "I don't know who I married." His voice had none of the usual fire, only a hollow ache I recognized all too well. It was the sound I made when I buried Robert, the sound of realizing the life you built was only half real. "She told me it was all for us," he said, flipping through the last few pages. "The house, the furniture. She said you offered." "She told me that too," I answered. Thomas didn't look up. He just stared at the last photo, a shot of Diana's stall, cash in hand, smiling like it was just business. The trial lasted 3 months. Diana walked into court each day like she was arriving for a lunch reservation. Heels, sharp blouse, pressed hair, immaculate. She didn't look at me, not once. Not even when they played the recording of her voice dripping with charm, promising that we could all be happy again if I just handed her back control. The evidence didn't care about her face. It spoke louder than she did. The photos, the invoices, the audio, the storage unit lease, all lined up like threads I had finally stitched into something solid. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts: fraud, misappropriation, obstruction. The judge read the sentence with no ceremony. 8 years, no parole. She didn't blink. She just stood there like the weight hadn't touched her. But I saw the tremor in her hand when the bailiff reached for her wrist. Thomas sat beside me as the sentence was read. He hadn't wanted to come, but he showed up. I didn't ask him to. Afterward, outside the courthouse, he rubbed his hands together like they were cold. "I believed everything she said," he murmured. "I know," I said. He didn't respond, but his shoulders lowered a little. A week later, he moved back into the house. Not for long, just a few weeks to gather himself, to think. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about Diana. We talked about the neighbor's cat, about his dad's old records, about how the faucet in the upstairs bathroom never stopped dripping. We were learning how to talk again. I never got back all the money, not even half. But I got back my peace, my silence, the sound of my own keys turning in my own door without anyone watching. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to lock it. I moved to Oregon 6 months after the trial, found a cottage with chipped paint and a stubborn garden, 1 floor and a wide window that faced the ocean. The sea wasn't always calm, but it was always honest. That was enough. I unpacked slowly, just the things that mattered. My sewing machine, my husband's old letters, a chipped teacup I'd had since Missouri. The rest stayed behind, boxed and forgotten. I turned the sunroom into a new kind of sewing room. No gowns this time, no urgent orders, just a long table, a few spare chairs, and a basket of fabric scraps sorted by color and texture. Every Tuesday afternoon, a small group of women from town came by, most of them widowed, some just lonely. We stitched, shared coffee, and sometimes sat in silence, each of us holding thread to something we didn't always know how to name. Thomas visits once a month. He never brings up Diana, and I don't ask. He brings fresh ground coffee from Portland and a newspaper he thinks I'll enjoy. We sit on the back porch and watch the wind lift the laundry line. He doesn't ask to stay. I don't ask why he comes. It's enough that he does. Angela sends postcards, one from Santa Fe, one from a roadside pie shop in Kentucky. Detective Tate mailed me a thank you note with a pressed violet inside. I keep it in the recipe book I rarely open. The bank, oddly enough, framed my fraud report. Edgar had it mounted and gave it to me on my last visit. "For your new start," he said. "It hangs by the door beside the coat rack." No one raises their voice in this house. No one shouts about cards or chairs or guilt. The woman who once screamed through the phone, who used my love like a business, she will never step inside this place. She has no key, no voice here. And I have no need to explain myself ever again. I know the weight of silence, I know the sound of a locked door, and I know what I've earned.